Hi, I'm Chet, and today I'm going to show you everything you need to know about soldering copper pipe. I've talked to a lot of people that are either unfamiliar with it or terrified of soldering pipe. By the end of this video, you should know everything you need to know, all the little tricks, what to do, what not to do. So here we go. First thing you're going to need, some heat. These bottles, they come in blue and yellow. The blue ones are propane, the yellow ones are MAP gas. And I would highly recommend you stay away from the blue ones because the propane gas it isn't hot enough to do the soldering that you need. It will work if you're in a pinch. It will work, but stay away from it. You need some solder, some flux. I use OD brand. I really haven't ever used anything else, so I'm kind of biased. I really like this stuff. It works good, but then again, I haven't used anything else. So you need something to cut your pipe with. I use these. I've had this one for about 8 years. I've never replaced the blade on it. I'm not even sure how to replace the blade on it. This thing has been really, really good to me, especially when you're working inside walls and cavities and you need to cut some pipe that you can't get a traditional screw style one into the wall. You're also going to need a little bit of sandpaper, sand cloth. These come in different forms. Pipe and fittings, obviously. This is 3/4 copper pipe, 3/4 90s. Some channel locks, an old rag. I also have an old rag in some water down here to cool it off after we're done. This sand cloth, you may have seen those, I don't even know what they're called, but they got holes in the inside and fitting cleaners on the end. They're about 10 bucks from Home Depot. You don't need them, they're worthless. Just use some sandpaper. If you have an old fitting and you need to clean the inside of it, fold your sandpaper over, stick your finger in there, and just clean it. Simple. Now, after you've cut your pipe to the length you want, what you absolutely have to do is clean the pipe. Now, this pipe is brand new. It looks clean, but you still need to sand it. I don't know if you can see the difference from there. Now, when you buy these fittings in bulk, they don't have these tags on them. You don't have to take it off, doesn't matter. Now, even if your fitting looks clean, I would suggest cleaning it, because it does make a big difference. Now, I'm going to dry fit this and show you what not to do. What I am not going to do is apply flux. I'm going to show you why you need flux. Now, even with the pipe sanded, everything clean, I'll show you what happens when you don't use flux. Now, one little trick I'm going to show you is, let's say I need to solder this pipe in this orientation, but it keeps falling. Now, how am I going to heat it up and apply solder with it doing that? You take your channel locks, and don't do this where you want the pipe. Rotate it about 20 degrees. Take the fitting and squeeze it. Now that's going to close the fitting onto the pipe. Now it's stuck, but this is the time when you want to put it right where you want it. That locks it in. It won't go anywhere. Okay, now, when you're heating up this pipe to apply your solder, heat rises. So what you want to do is always heat from the bottom. Don't heat from the top if you can avoid it. Try to heat from the bottom, like this. And very, very important, always heat the fitting, because in an ideal situation, when you have flux inside here, when you heat it up, that heat's going to rise and spread to the top, and the top is where you want to apply the solder, because at the point where this reaches the melting point of your solder, you'll know that the bottom is also at the melting point, and your solder will flow. The solder chases the flux, and the flux chases the heat. So where you heat and where you apply your solder is very important. Now, again, there is no flux inside this fitting. I'm going to show you why you need flux. As you can see, the solder just kind of puddled up right there. It didn't go inside the fitting. It's still really hot. Look, I just wiped it right off. It did not do anything. Here, I'll take it apart. That was pretty difficult to get apart because I crimped it. But as you can see, no solder. That's a leak. That's a terrible leak. Alright, so I'm going to clean this up again, and we'll see what happens when we do apply solder. Okay, I've cooled off the fitting and the pipe. Now we're going to apply solder. This is old, but it'll work. So is my brush. Looks pretty terrible, actually. But it'll work. Now you want to apply your solder about the depth that your fitting is going to be. Make sure you get it all the way around. I'm probably going to have a hard time getting this back on. Make sure you get the flux all the way around. Always make sure your fitting's made up all the way. All right, now, with your solder, it takes 3/4 of an inch of solder to make up a 3/4 fitting, and about a 1/2 inch of solder to make up a half fitting. But you always want to use more than that. If you get into a little bit of a bind, you can put some flux on your solder like that. If you think it's not taking well enough. I'll get my rag handy so I can wipe it clean, make it look professional. And let's go. always wipe your fittings clean. You don't have to, but it just makes for a much cleaner appearance. I got a wet rag here, cool it off. All right, now I'm going to rotate this up. Now since heat rises, you always want to do your bottom fitting first. And while you're heating this one up, this heat will move much faster up to here, allowing you to solder this one. It's best not to solder your top one first and then move to the bottom. So you always want to start low and go high. Follow the heat. Generally you do this all in one run. Let's switch hands here. Remember, always heat the fitting, not the pipe. Now, when your solder starts running, remove the heat. You're done heating. There's no reason to heat it up anymore. If you keep applying heat, you're just going to blow it out. By blow it out, I mean all the flux that's inside, you're going to overheat it and it's just going to dissipate. And it's not going to give you a good seal. So heat from one side, apply solder to the other, and when your solder starts to melt on this side, take away your heat. You're done. Finish soldering it up, clean it up, you can cool it off. I like to clean the pipe and fitting off with a wet rag. It helps cool down everything faster, because when this is still hot, when it's still slightly molten, if you bump it or something shifts, you could disturb the solder that's inside the fitting and cause a leak. So you want to cool it off as fast as you can to get that solder to set up, to stick. Now, what I'm going to do, since you saw a good solder job, that one actually came out really well. I'm going to show you what happens if you have water inside your pipe, and why it is imperative that you make sure all your fittings are dry and that you don't have any water coming out of your pipes as you're trying to solder them, because it's a nightmare to try to solder if you've got water, standing water, dripping water, it doesn't matter. Because that water, when you heat it up, causes steam. Steam expands and it blows your flux and your solder right out of the pipe. That's assuming that you can even get it hot enough for your solder to melt. So let's clean these. Lost motor fitting. There it is. We're going to do this the right way, but we're going to put a little bit of water. Hopefully I don't put too much so that we don't lose too much heat. This is going to be terrible. All right. I've got my water line to right about here. A little more flux for good measure. All right, let's see how terrible this goes. All right. You saw the problem with the bottom one. It did not want to take, didn't get enough heat. I don't know if you can see that. It looked like it finally took. That might hold. I am really worried about this joint right here, because I could see steam bubbling out in certain places. I don't know if you could see that. Over here, we didn't get hardly any solder in on this side. The problem with having a little bit of water in there is it looks like it took well, but I can almost guarantee you it's going to leak on this side. So you need to make sure there's no water in your pipes. Make sure they're dry, make sure they're clean. Use a lot of flux, use a little bit of solder. Make sure you have the right heat. And that's about it. Alright, so we've just soldered some 3/4 copper pipe. Easy. Anybody can do that. A lot of people say there's an art to it. It's really not. It just takes a little bit of practice. Another thing I can't stress enough is be aware of your surroundings. When you're heating a pipe, this flame, the heat travels a long distance, so you need to be aware of what is around when you're soldering pipe, be it if you're inside a wall or a cabinet. Also, what's underneath your pipe. If you're laying under your pipe and soldering, solder is going to drip on you, on your feet, run down your shoes. It's not fun. So just be aware of your surroundings, be safe, always keep a wet rag around. I like to use flashing. There's any number of things that you can use to put behind where you're soldering to keep the heat away from walls and whatnot. If you have any questions or think I'm doing something wrong, please comment. I will respond. Thank you for watching, and that's it. I'm actually really curious about this joint. So I'm going to heat it up, see if I can pull it out and see the condition of the solder on the inside of the joint. Let me get the gloves. Actually looks pretty decent from here. That's what it should look like.